Hello and welcome everyone to the Silicon Security Day 2021, the Awareness Edition. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Carolina Haider. I am IT editor and your host today. This is Make Media's main online event that aims to respond to the challenges of the cybersecurity these days. Because of home office, the use of cloud technologies, and also hackers becoming more professionals, companies are more exposed than ever. The slogan of this event is protect your organization to keep innovating. And we have amazing professionals in cybersecurity to show you how to address this goal. I would like to introduce our keynote speakers. Jelle Wieringer is security advocate at KnowBe4. Mark LaLiberty is security operations manager at WatchGuard. And Felipe Duarte, he is security researcher at AppGate. A warm welcome from my side to all speakers. But before we jump into the session, a few words about our agenda. First, we will have today's presentation about the psychology of social engineering attacks. Then we will welcome Mark, who will give us an overview about the dark web. And then we will have Felipe talking about ransomware and how to prevent attacks. And afterwards, we will have our round table. We will discuss about many different aspects about or around the effective protection in the new digital era. David Howell, a technology editor, will join us this part of this event too. So stay tuned. It will be an exciting journey. And Jelle, I will now give the stage free for you to start with your presentation.
Welcome, everybody. Today, we are going to talk about psychology, science, and social engineering, the combination between the three and what makes it so powerful. So just to start it off, my name is Jelle Wieringa. I'm Dutch. I live in the Netherlands, but my role is throughout Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So I do a lot of conferences, I do a lot of talks. I talk to a lot of different organizations. And the one thing that keeps popping up all along my career is that we're in cybersecurity and the bad guys are winning. So we need to collaborate. We need to work together more. Therefore, if you ever want to continue the conversation after this presentation, look me up on LinkedIn. Let's connect. Let's work together and see if we can actually make this world a safer place. So I work for KnowBe4. For those of you that haven't heard of KnowBe4 yet, and KnowBe4 is a US-based organization, global leader in everything to do with security awareness training and simulated phishing. So we offer our customers a way to train people on every threat that is available on the internet, and so their users can detect it and know how to work securely. But we also test this knowledge through automated phishing emails. Now, our job is to help organizations to manage the ongoing problem of social engineering. And the one word that sticks out here is the word ongoing, because unfortunately, social engineering is not something that will ever go away. And that's because the nature of social engineering. But the ongoing part is really important. You need to keep your organization on edge to make sure that social engineering attacks are defended against. Now, social engineering, and I'll just baseline it here, the way we talk about it, it's the act of exploiting human weaknesses to gain access to personal information and protected systems. Meaning, what a cyber criminal intentionally doesn't do is attack your technology layer. They won't attack your firewall, your IPS, or anything else, because they can attack the human. And it's one of the most used cyber attacks today. So what do? Well, we help organizations to enable their employees to make smarter security decisions. That's very simple to do. We actually create what we call human firewalls. Now, is this necessary? Yes, it is. So we often hear things like the human is the weakest link, and I don't agree. I actually think human is the most vulnerable link. But we can strengthen this vulnerability. We can make sure that this vulnerability goes away through security awareness training. Now, if you look at all of the successful attacks that are out there, the majority of all attacks, and I'm talking between 70 and 90% of all successful cyber attacks, start with the human. Now, that 70, 90% is debatable. Sometimes some reports say it's 70, some reports will say it's 90 or even over. So just to be on the safe side, I usually talk about between 70 and 90%. By the way, a good second one to protect against is vulnerable systems, unpatched systems. That's why patching is so important. Between 20 to 40% of all successful attacks leverage 0 days, leverage non-patched systems. So if you look at this attack vector, it's even evolving today. We see new attack vectors coming in that social engineering leverages. Social engineering being the manipulation of humans, but they can use all different types of techniques to do so. Now, we all know phishing, we all know smishing, which is SMS-based phishing, or nowadays through WhatsApp or Telegram or anything like that. We also know voice phishing, we sometimes call that pretexting. But what we see is that those types of attacks are being augmented by things like deepfakes where you can have AI and artificial intelligence create imagery or audio, which you can use. So you can send a phishing email out to people wanting them to do something, and then you can follow it up with a voicemail, for instance, in the person of somebody they know to actually make that whole attack seem more convincing. Now, luckily, we haven't seen too many deepfakes attacks in the wild yet. There are a couple, but it's still hard to do, even for cyber criminals who have unlimited power and money. But what we do see is that this will be something that will hit us in the next year or the year after. So it's good to prepare. Another thing what we see a lot is the Internet of Things is coming up. There's millions, billions even of devices out there that are made primarily for their functionality, not for security in mind. So what we see is it's being leveraged. It's being leveraged where, for instance, people have a Google Home or Alexa in their house. Well, that's an IoT device. That's something that can be used as a threat vector for social engineers. They can listen in on your conversations, for instance, if they hack the device. Now, it's gotten to a point where the FBI even sent out a warning. And this warning particularly goes in on something called business email compromise, where one person in the finance department is directed by a high official to actually send a wire transfer money to a different account. It's one of the most profitable ways for cyber criminals to get money out of organizations today. But what the FBI is seeing is that where BEC, business email compromise, is somewhat of a traditional, almost legacy form of social engineering, it's now evolving into a new category. So they named this category business identity compromise, where they combine both BEC techniques, phishing techniques, voicemail techniques, with new technologies such as deepfakes. Something to watch out for. And can we solve this with good old technology? No, unfortunately not. The adoption rate of new technology is simply too slow. If cyber criminals come out with a new attack form and release that or unleash that upon the world, then it takes time for that attack to be analyzed and for that attack to be created upon new defenses. So they need time to develop the new defenses. That time period is a very vulnerable period where cyber criminals actually make a lot of money. And once we have defensive measures, once we have technology that can help us, well, it's fairly easy for cyber criminals to just change their techniques a bit. And third, remember, social engineering is all about manipulating people, humans. It's not a machine you can switch on, switch off, or change very simply. It's something complex that takes time to learn new things, that takes time to change behavior in humans. So no, technology, unfortunately, will not save us. There's no silver bullet here. So what can we do? Well, one of the things we can do is to better understand the foundations. And those foundations will help us to gain insights to nearly all forms of social engineering. So these foundations have a lot to do with science and psychology, with the way we work. Maybe more than you even realize. Take this example. Read with me for a minute. It doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and the last letter is in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. So if you read this, our brain is filtering letters and words so they can make sense to us. It does it full automatic. So what it does is it filters reality for us. So most cyber attacks that happen out there are the results of an unintentional action driven by emotion or our human response to something that is not really there. So cyber criminals know this very well. They know that our brain takes some kind of information and creates our own reality based on it. So if you take a look at what our brain does, it filters, it interprets, and it presents our own reality to us. And that doesn't mean that your reality is the same as my reality, because our brains might work in different ways. Things that our brain can do for us, for instance, is it can create expectations. That's why you can read those words. Your brain already anticipates and fills in the blanks. One of those expectations, for instance, is that you know that you put your finger to a flame, you will get burned every single time. Your brain kind of registers this. So every time you see a flame, you see fire, your brain automatically registers, hey, that's danger. Same with driving a car. Driving a car is very autonomous. We've done it for a while. So our brain is used to the situation and knows how to interact with different oncomers or traffic. So our brain is a very powerful tool. Knowing this, there are 3 ways that all of us operate, 3 ways that cyber criminals love to employ in their phishing campaigns or in their social engineering campaigns. The first method that they employ has to do with the way we think. So Dr. Daniel Kahneman came up with a model, a 2-system thinking model, thinking fast and slow. That's actually the title of his book. I highly recommend you read it. It's a good book. On the left side of your screen, you'll see system 1 thinking. And system 1 thinking is very fast. It's autonomous. It doesn't cost a lot of energy. You, or your brain, actually employs system 1 thinking when driving that car. Again, it's an autonomous process. You don't really think about how to drive a car. You just do it. Your brain anticipates for you. Your brain makes decisions for you really quickly. It can look at oncomers and decide what it wants to do. If there's a collision ahead, your brain will try to avoid it. That's system 1 thinking. The only downside to system 1 thinking is that it can create errors. It's very error prone. You make mistakes using system 1 thinking. On the other hand of the model is system 2 thinking. That's a part of our brain that's rather slow. It's really powerful though. It takes energy to actually employ system 2 thinking. Think about when you were actually really mad and you wanted to calm yourself down. You had a really strong emotion and you wanted to control that emotion. That's really hard to do. System 2 thinking is the part of your brain that does that. It can actually do magical things. You can also use it, for instance, for mathematics, really complex mathematical calculations. That part of your brain, system 2 thinking, is able to solve those, not too quickly, but it is able to solve them. It's very slow, but it's very reliable. Now, one of the techniques cyber criminals do is, because they understand how our brain works, is they actually want to bypass system 2 thinking. They want you to act autonomously, automatically even. That's why a phishing email is so simple. A small piece of text with a small explanation that's very enticing to you, that looks very attractive to you. And then they offer the link. You don't have to go to a website, log in and do all sorts of things. So just click that link and you're done. It's an easy way for your brain to skip the whole thinking process and just go into the action mode. So that's the way that our brain works. That's method 1 of how cyber criminals misuse that against us or abuse it against us. The second way is in the way we decide. Again, our brain does some marvelous things. A good example of that is the OODA model. The OODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. It's a model that was designed by the US Army, the Air Force to be precise. And it's a model for real efficient and quick decision making. That's why there's a picture of a pilot in here, where that fighter pilot, well, he doesn't have time to react. He needs to make decisions really quickly and go about his business. So if you look at this model, we usually observe a situation, Our brain then thinks about all of the parameters around that situation. It decides what we want to do, and only then does it act. We think before we act. Now, what does a cyber criminal love to do? Well, he likes to hijack this OODA loop. He wants us to have a knee-jerk reaction. That's a reaction that comes out of intuition and not out of actual rational. So he tends to hijack the OODA loop by disabling the first three phases. He wants us right to go into action. Don't think, just click. That's what they want. It's a very effective way. There's a lot of tricks they can do for that, to do that. One of the tricks is, for instance, to create urgency in their attacks. Good phishing email is comprised of that little piece of text, that link, but it also has some urgency factor. Something like, your password has been hacked, you need to change it right now. Or your bank account is compromised. Click here to change your password and log in again. Something which is dear to you, which creates emotion, strong emotion, but also creates urgency. Because your brain will go into a sort of emergency mode. Hang on, I need to act right now. Better click that link. And before you know it, you've clicked the link and fallen for the trap. You've already downloaded some malicious content or went to a watering hole website where the content is, or you filled in some information that you shouldn't have shared. It's something that works for everyone, because most people actually fall for the simplest of phishing attacks because they're distracted. They are not paying attention to what's going on around them, or rather they're paying attention to everything that's going around them, but not focusing on their work at the hand, their screen, their email that they're reading. So they click through it really quickly. A lot of people fall for the trap where they receive an email from a colleague, but at 3 o'clock at night. Well, most colleagues of mine don't work at 3 o'clock at night, at least not the ones that are in Europe. So it's strange for me to receive an email at that time. And most of the time it has a strange request in it. For me, that should raise some flags, some red flags, like, hey, this is not right. But if I'm very busy, if I'm distracted, I'll just click through it. Hey, I know this guy, I know this colleague. Let's just click through it. That's how phishing works. Phishing is based upon not having you think, but having you react instinctively. The third method is a rather sophisticated one. Our brain is built up out of our experience. Everything we know comes through what we've learned throughout the years. And we assume things based on this experience, and we call this cognitive bias. There's over 161 cognitive biases discovered today. That's an awful lot. A great example, by the way, is overconfidence. Overconfidence is your false sense of skill or talent, meaning you think you can do something, but you're actually not capable of, or can't do it as well as you think you can. Overconfidence. Another example is something called the confirmation bias. If we think we are right and we want to let others know that we are right, we will look for all types of evidence and information that will contribute or confirm what we think is right. We will actually negate or just simply ignore all of the information that's counterintuitive or counterproductive to what we think, because we want to convince the others we are right. This is called confirmation bias. So you might ignore some really valid data just because, well, it doesn't suit your needs. These two are examples, but there's many, many more. And I definitely suggest you read up on it on the internet. It's a very interesting reading. But cognitive biases sneak into everything we do. They basically underlie our thinking and our assumptions. And therefore, they can be exploited because cognitive biases, the same as the OODA loop and the same as system 1 and 2 thinking, is something that our brain is conditioned to do. It comes through evolution. It comes through years and years of experience. It's simply the way we tick, we work. So it's hard to change this. And a cybercriminal realizes this and does use it against us. Very powerful indeed. So now what? Well, there's a couple of things you can do. First of all, as I already told you, technology doesn't solve that much. Sure, we still need technology. Let's be fair. Good cybersecurity security posture comes from a combination between people, processes, and technology. So on the technology side, you need your firewall, you still need your email gateway, your data leakage prevention, or any other security measure you want. On the procedure side, you need things like a 4I procedure where somebody checks the work that somebody else did before validating it. Or you need validation processes in regular business type processes. But you also need the people side. And that's what is most effective against social engineering. The one thing that really helps well is, training people. Security awareness training is a highly effective way to make people aware of the threats that are out there, gives them the ability to detect when those threats are attacking them, and gives them the skills to react in a secure manner. Now, you can train in very different ways. You can put people in a classroom, put a trainer or an instructor in front of them and bore them to death for 2 to 3 hours. I wouldn't suggest this. Nowadays, we've got new school awareness training, meaning you don't have to sit in the classroom anymore. You can do it online. You can do it based on however you feel comfortable learning, whether it's based on watching a video, playing a game, or looking at a slideshow, or just listening to a book, an audiobook. That can be a very good way to train people. But if you train in the right way, the results are actually pretty stunning. We do a yearly report, which is freely downloadable on our website. We look at organizations that just joined us, customers that just joined us and haven't done any training at all. So if you look at that, somewhere around 30% of all people within organizations tend to click a link if they're not trained, tend to fall for a phishing email. And this is just phishing emails, right? It's not even about text-based phishing or voice phishing, just phishing emails. That's what we base the report on. Now, if you start training those people, the results are pretty cool. So you get a drop to 60.4%. And in the end, if you train them for 12 months, you can take it down to nearly 5%. Now, what does this tell you? Simply put, it reduces the risk for your entire organization to fall victim to a cyber attack. Because remember, 70 to 90% of all successful cyber attacks start with that human. So if you can prevent that, if you can better protect that human, if you can better enable that human to make smarter security decisions, that's a benefit for the entire company. Because when you look at phishing and social engineering attacks, it just takes one person to fall victim. It doesn't need to be a whole organization. Just one person that clicks the wrong link can introduce ransomware in your organization or can introduce a data leak in your organization. So it's important that we try to look at how we can best train the entirety of the organization from the reception desk all the way up to C-level. There are some challenges, though. Things that traditional security awareness training kind of overlooks. So traditional awareness efforts usually work on the premise or the belief that if I share information with people, that automatically leads to an action. So new information leads to behavior change. That is not the truth. What happens is I can give you all kinds of information, but if that information is not interesting to you, if it's not relevant to you, maybe you work on a financial department. Do you really have to know all of the logistic compliance settings? Maybe not. Vice versa, same thing. If you ship boxes all day, why would you need to know anything about financial compliance? So make sure it's relevant to the person. Make sure it's interesting. People need to be motivated. It needs to be fun. Fun meaning, if I learn best through video games, playing video games, cool. Present me with a bunch of video games that actually teach me something about security awareness. Another challenge comes in the fact that if we leave all of this knowledge that we impart, if we leave the security awareness training bit on its own and do not test this or challenge this, it might lead to overconfidence bias. I already told you about overconfidence bias, which is basically a wrong assumption of your skills and talents. So we need to train people, but we also need to give them a way to test it out in the real world. That's why we have an automated phishing platform. We send out fake phishing attacks that are kind of harmless. So somebody gets an email, looks the same as a real world phishing email because we use real world phishing emails as our examples. It gets a link. If they click the link, instead of being brought to a website with malicious content or downloading ransomware, they get a new pop-up, a new website telling them, oops, you clicked the wrong link, and they get an explanation why they shouldn't be doing that. And sometimes, depending on how often they do it, they get some remedial training to refresh their memory on why you need it. Now, knowledge that is unchallenged leads to overconfident bias. A good example is doctors that learn spinal surgery, something which is rather difficult to do. Actually, in the beginning, don't make mistakes, but after they've done it 15 times, that's when the mistakes creep in. So make sure if you ever have spinal surgery, make sure you get a young, fresh doctor, somebody that's just in the trade. He's less likely to make mistakes than somebody who's done it a long time ago. Pilot, same thing. If you just graduated from pilot school, hey, you probably do everything by the book. Everything is fine. But then after a bunch of flying hours, well, errors creep in. The good thing with pilots is that because they fly so often, experience is bolstered again. And then after about 800 flight hours, you'll see that those mistakes creep out again. They also get a lot of remedial training, so that helps. So what are the things you can take home? What are the takeaways that are important here? Well, to sum it all up, social engineering is a game of manipulation. They taunt your emotions. They taunt the ways that your brain actually works and is built through evolution and through experience. Overconfidence, cognitive biases. They use urgency to create drama and make your brain skip that thinking step. So we skip the OODA loop. And we tend to build simple phishing emails, simple phishing voice messages that convince you don't have to think. You can just take that action. Think system 1 thinking, system 2 thinking. So remember, if you ever see an email, look at that email and think about it. Is that an email you're supposed to be getting at that hour from that person? Is the message or the request you're getting, is that logical? All things you can do. The second thing what happens is have the right focus. Training really helps. But you need to do it in the right way. So if we do it like school, we train something, we give them an exam and they get a good grade. Well, for school, that might work a bit. In the workplace with security awareness training, this doesn't work because you can get a great exam grade. So you can get an A+, fine, you did great on the exam. You understood everything that was taught to you at that moment in that lesson. But the thing with security is that it needs to be done in practice. So you need to make sure that you actually shape behavior. You change the behavior into more secure behavior. It's not about them getting a good grade. It's about them being safe in the workplace, being safe at home. So make sure that when you do the training yourself, the training you get presented from your organization, or when you are training your employees, make sure you focus on changing their behavior. That's the outcome that you need. And lastly, it shouldn't all be that hard. A lot of social engineering is based on the way we tick, that psychology factor. So one of the most effective ways to combat social engineering, and one of the things that you get taught throughout the entire training, is think before you click. Does that email resonate from the right person? Does the questions you get, are you allowed to share that information? Simple things that are common sense, that are not hard to do. And that common sense, if you know the basics, the foundation of security awareness, the foundation of social engineering, the ones that I just talked about, it will become much easier to detect and recognize social engineering attacks. So common sense is a very powerful factor. Well, that's it from me. Hi, Carolina.
Well, hi. And thank you, Jelle, for the interesting insights. Wow, the brain filters are real, and we really have to learn how to react properly.
It definitely makes it easier if you understand the foundations to be safer. That's it.
Amazing fact. Well, thank you, Jelle, for now. And we are going to discuss the topics you have pointed out in your presentation during our roundtable.
Definitely. We'll meet then.
Now, I would like to hand over to Marc Laliberty. He is Security Operations Manager at WatchGuard. And he will give us an overview about the dark web. Welcome, Marc.
Hey, thank you very much for having
Hey
me.
there. Thank you for being my guest. So I heard you brought us something, right?
I sure did. Today, we are going to be chatting about the dark web and how it works, a bit of an overview of its history, how some of our data ends up on it, and then ways to defend against some of these cyber attacks we're seeing that fuel those data breaches. So thank you very much again for having me on. With that, I guess we can go ahead and get started. So real quick, before we hop in, a little bit about me. I've been at WatchGuard about 9 years, almost 10 years now, in a few different roles and responsibilities. But right now, I manage both our security operations team, so maintaining the day-to-day security risk management at WatchGuard, the organization, as well as managing our threat research team, what we call the WatchGuard Threat Lab. On the research side, our job is basically to keep our finger on the pulse of security. We every day go review our threat intelligence feeds that we get from our customer appliances deployed around the world, third-party feeds, whatever the latest cybersecurity news is, and try and paint this picture of what the cyber threat landscape looks like so that we can turn around and provide you with actionable actions to take on how to defend against the latest cyber threats. I'm a true hacker through and through. I grew up ripping apart every electronics device I got. Not always putting them back together correctly, but learning a lot along the way to kind of build me up to where I'm at right now. So enough about me. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to be chatting about today. And we'll start with an overview of the dark web, what it is, how it works, where it came from, how it differs from the regular internet. And then we'll talk a bit about data breaches and how some of our information ends up for sale or for free on the dark web. And then once we've gone through all that, we'll pivot and I'll give you some defensive tips on how to defend yourself and your organization from having your data show up on the dark web. So for time's sake, let's go ahead and jump on in with a brief overview of the dark web. And before we can start talking about it, we actually needed to talk about the traditional internet first. So the internet's actually made up of 3 different layers, and it starts with the surface web. And the surface web is really just anything out there on the internet that a search crawler can index. So every single day, every hour, every minute, Google, Bing, Yahoo, Ask Jeeves, if that's still around, has these bots that go around the internet and try and find every single web page they can. They'll typically start on a page, see what links it has, and then navigate to each of those links and then sees what links those have and go to each of them. And all along that way, it saves information about the page, different keywords it has, images, anything it can find, so that when you and I go to Google and look up what's a recipe for jambalaya, we're able to see a whole bunch of web pages that have those recipes. The surface web is basically anything that anyone unauthenticated has access to. Typically, it means that it has to be linked from somewhere else, though. The crawlers have to have a spot to start, and then from there, they have to be able to find these pages. Now, just below that is what we call the deep web, and this is different than the dark web. So the deep web is still the traditional internet. You still get to it in Chrome or Firefox or Safari, but in this case, it's pages that you can't get to from a search index. These crawlers aren't able to find them. It could be because they're unlinked. So it's just a single page that doesn't have any links from anywhere else. So unless you know it exists, you don't know where to find it. Could be it's protected behind authentication. So if you've got a Facebook page set to private, that's technically a part of the deep web. If you've got a application protected behind authentication, that's technically the deep web as well. The bottom line is you can still get to it through your traditional web browser, but it's got a little bit extra protection so that Google can't find it with its search indexer. Now, that's how we get to the dark web then, which is the portion of the internet that not only can a indexer not find it, but you actually need special software in order to even access it. You're not going to be able to go to a dark web website through Google Chrome or Safari. Instead, you need something like Tor or the Onion Router or I2P, which is the Invisible Internet Project. And by gating it behind this special software, they're also able to provide additional protections to privacy of everyone that's communicating across this new underground web framework. While there's a whole bunch of different types of dark web technologies, the most popular by a pretty substantial margin is Tor, the onion router. And that's the one we're going to be talking about today. And so with that, let's go ahead and give a chat about exactly how Tor works. And while honestly, I could probably sit here for 2 hours going through all the minute details about it, because it is super interesting, we'll try and keep it at a pretty high level here just to make sure that we're not getting bogged down. So let's start out with the normal internet first. So let's pretend that I'm a bad guy and I'm trying to find myself a hacker for hire because I want to go deface this website or maybe steal some trade secrets from this company. On the normal internet, I'd be sitting at my computer. Maybe I'm protected by a VPN. I'm definitely using HTTPS encryption. So no matter what, my connection's going out there. People can't see exactly what's inside the connection, but that isn't enough protection on its own to protect me or that website from potential law enforcement action. So let's say I'm a bad guy and I want to go out to rentahacker.com. My web browser, so Google Chrome or Firefox, will make a connection from my computer to that server. And then that server will turn around and return the content of that page back to me. Now, again, that content is most likely protected with encryption, either through a VPN or just because it's over HTTPS, which means anyone in the middle of this, whether it be my internet service provider, law enforcement doing a man-in-the-middle connection, my employer, they may not know exactly what's on that web page being returned or exactly what I requested or information I sent, but they know that I communicated with that website. And so if they know that that website is malicious, if they know it's selling stuff I shouldn't be getting access to, or it's hosting illicit materials, or if it's like the website of one of my competitors, they'll know I'm communicating with that and they might pay more attention to me, track me down, and potentially figure out I'm doing something bad. The way the dark web is designed, and specifically the onion router, it not only protects the content of that communication, so it still has encryption to prevent people from seeing what you're looking at, but it also protects the identity of both me as the client and the server itself I'm connecting to. And it's pretty interesting at how it does that. So with the onion router, it's actually built up of thousands of nodes out there that are called relay nodes. And anyone can set one up. Anyone can go download the Tor browser and set it up as a relay node. You'll see a lot of universities around the world doing this to provide secure and free and privacy-focused internet access to a lot of organizations or a lot of individuals out there. Now, let's say that, again, I want to connect to a website, but I want to protect my identity as I do it. How the onion router works is it's basically an onion. That's how it gets its name, where I build this connection from the outside in and peel off layers as I move across, protecting the communications all along the way. And it's getting a bit technical, but let's go through with an example. So the first thing my browser is going to do is it says, okay, I want to connect to this website over here. Well, I'm going to go out and grab a dozen or so different nodes and build this path to that website. And then I'm going to take the first node in that path and I'm going to connect to it. So from me to that first one, I'll say, all right, let's open up a connection. So for now, that node knows that I exist, and that's it. Then through that encrypted connection, I'll open one to the next node. So now that first one knows I exist and I'm talking to that second one, and that's it. Through that connection, I open up another one to the third node. That first one, it still only knows I'm talking to that first node in that list. It has no idea about anything that goes on after that. So you can see as you build this kind of onion outwards, only neighbors know who's talking to who, and they don't know who's at the very start and they don't know who's at the very end. And as my packet goes through this connection, the first node peels off the layer and says, okay, I got to send this to the second one. It peels off a layer, sends it to the third one, peels off a layer, so on and so forth until it gets to the end. And the bottom line is, through this technology now, I, as a client, am able to talk to a server and both of our identities are protected so that anyone in the middle of this has no idea what computer started this and what server ended this connection. They know that two entities are talking. They don't know what they're talking about, again, because of encryption. But along the way, they don't know who I am, where I'm at. And that's important. And that's actually why the Tor browser was actually originally developed. In fact, it was first developed by the United States Naval Research Laboratory. So the US government created the Onion router as a way to protect their intelligence communications. So they designed it so that if we have a spy embedded in a foreign country, they can connect back over the normal internet using this special software in a way that if that foreign government is watching all of their connections, they have no idea who they're talking to or talking with. All they know is that they're using the Tor browser in this case. Now it's actually maintained as an open source project by an organization called the Tor Project now. They were initially sponsored by the Electronic Frontier Foundation. If you're not familiar with them, they're a nonprofit organization based here in the States that do a lot of work towards protecting a free and open internet. But the majority of the funding still comes from the US government. And it's kind of funny where all we hear about is, all these cyber criminals that are using the Tor browser to facilitate ransomware payments or to sell hacking tools or sell drugs and all the other bad stuff that shows up on the dark web. But because it is such a useful tool at protecting communications, a lot of its funding still comes from the US government to protect those communications. Now, what can you find on the dark web? Well, Facebook is there. Even on the dark web, you can't escape it. I'm sure they've already found a way to register a meta www.onion address. There's also the hidden wiki, which is basically a phone book for the dark web. There's marketplaces for literally everything. You can go on there and buy a list of usernames and passwords from the latest data breach, or a new ransomware as a service variant that you can go deploy out to victim networks. You can buy physical goods as well. Like all sorts of different things are available on the dark web. But one of the biggest ones is personally identifiable information, or PII. In fact, PII shows up on the dark web quite a lot. Everything from medical records to national identification numbers, password dumps, obviously, intellectual property shows up. And interestingly, some of these types of information have values that you may not have guessed. Like, for example, in the United States, we use social security numbers as our national identification number. And you might think that if someone were to get that, they could steal your identity. That's got to be as bad as it gets, right? So that's got to be worth a lot of money. But in reality, some of these things are not worth a whole lot. Like typically a social security number is only worth about $1 because on its own, it's not really enough to steal someone's identity these days. On the other hand, if you get a hold of their medical records or their education records, that includes not just identification numbers, but also their address, their date of birth, some history about the individual as well. All of this information can be used to more easily open accounts under their name, or with medical records, commit insurance fraud, depending on where you're at, bill fictitious doctor's visits to their insurance or to the government-funded healthcare, and basically use that as a way to gain money. It's really interesting when you see how much some of these records are being sold for. But the bottom line is, almost everyone out there in the world has at least some PII for sale on the dark web. There's been millions of breaches with millions of records seemingly every single day, it feels like, where my team, again, as we're checking the news every morning, we'll go up and see that, there's another 10 million record breach that's ended up for sale on this underground forum we follow. In fact, we actually maintain WatchGuard's dark web scan database for our dark web scan tool. And on our own, just for free, because we've got a strict don't fund cybercrime policy, we've been able to gather 2.7 billion unique usernames and passwords from breaches that have shown up. And that's somewhere right around 700 million or so unique passwords that individuals have used as well. And again, this is just what we've gotten for free. You can imagine what a cyber criminal with some looser morals and a little bit of funding could get their hands on, and then turn that around into attacks against organizations. And so let's pivot now and talk about some of those attacks that are ongoing. And one of the first things that I want to make clear is that it doesn't matter how big or small you are. Every organization has something of value. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in business. And the cost of a data breach can really add up, even for smaller organizations. In fact, if we look at the recent IBM cost of a data breach report, they found that on average, breaches still cost around $160 or so per record breached. So even if you're a smaller company and maybe you only have like 1,000 customers, that still adds up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential costs because of that breach. And it's not just, the ransomware extortion you were forced to pay. Some of these costs are also bringing in the third party to investigate the breach and help make sure that you've patched whatever hole let the bad guy in. Potential regulatory action if you're found out of compliance with things like GDPR. The reputation hit or loss of revenue from any downtime from the breach, or because your customers just don't trust you anymore because you've suffered from a breach. All of these add up to an actual monetary cost that even smaller organizations can be crippling for them. And when it comes to detecting that we've been the victim of a breach globally, we're not doing a good enough job. Like on average last year, it took organizations 212 days to identify that they had been the victim of a breach. That means we're talking 7 months from the point where the attacker first gained access to their network to the point where organizations figured out that a breach had occurred. And even once you've identified that you've been the victim of a breach, it still took 75 days on average to clean up after the fact now. So now we're talking like 9-10 months from the point of infection to the point where you kick the cyber criminal off your network. And this is largely because a lot of organizations take all of their resources, all of their funding, and put it towards preventing a cyber attack and not enough towards detecting and responding to one quickly. Like I work for a security company. I'd love to tell you, buy our product and you are unhackable. But the fact is, anyone that says you're unhackable with XYZ product is lying to you. There's no such thing. There's no silver bullet in security, which means that if you're focusing entirely on prevention and you don't have the visibility to detect something that slips through, you're going to end up as one of these statistics of a 10-month time from that breach occurring to figuring it out and cleaning up after the fact. And when it comes to these breaches, over 80% of them are leveraging stolen or compromised credentials in the last year. Like these credentials are available on the dark web for sale or for free. You've probably seen recent news stories of these databases of billions of records out there for free. And if we're not using strong and unique passwords for each one of our accounts, all it takes is one breach for another account to fall. Because an attacker, the first thing they're going to do is take those credentials they've stolen and try those against a whole bunch of related services. And because password reuse is still rampant out there, they tend to get a lot of success. We actually saw this back in 2012 when LinkedIn was breached. An attacker made off with around 117 million usernames and passwords after hacking LinkedIn back then. And the first thing they did was they went through and looked for potentially useful credentials. And in that list, they found a LinkedIn account that was using a Dropbox.com email address. And it turns out that Dropbox employee that signed up for LinkedIn had a pretty weak password, and the attacker was able to crack it really easily. And it also turns out they reused that password with their Dropbox corporate email account. So this attacker that hacked LinkedIn back then was able to then crack the password of one of these users and use that to then hack Dropbox within a few weeks and cause a data breach from them as well. And this is pretty much par for the course. This is ongoing, where the first thing they're going to do is try and use those credentials to carry out additional breaches too. So how do they get some of these data that they steal from us? The first big one is spear phishing. Now, we've all probably were familiar with that old email claiming to be a Nigerian prince saying, if you give me $500 to get out of my country, I'll give you half of my riches. The good news is we as users are getting better at spotting those. But unfortunately, cyber criminals are now getting better at crafting more believable messages to get past some of our suspicions. These days, they're using spear phishing emails that are highly targeted towards a specific individual or organization unit to make them, again, a lot more believable. Like phishing's been around since the 90s, but we started seeing notable spear phishing really start to pick up just recently within the last decade or so. And they've had a lot of success with it. There was an attack against RSA, really big cybersecurity company, that was successful because of spear phishing. A breach against Anthem here in the States, or the Democratic National Convention back in 2016, were all just spear phishing emails. Again, using information about who we work with, who we work for, who our friends are, and then making a message to be more believable with that in context. These days, they're using automated social network recon. So they're going through your LinkedIn and figuring out who your coworkers are. They're going through your Facebook, figuring out who your friends are, figuring out what your organization looks like, and then using brand impersonation, where they'll make it look like an email coming from DHL or coming from your own organization. And they make it look like it's coming from your boss potentially with a very time-sensitive message. And if you're, busy like all of us are during the day, not paying close attention, you might see one of these emails come in, miss some of the signs it's a phish, and fall for whatever action the criminal is trying to get you to take. In fact, 90 to 95% of breaches also involve a spear phish at some point in time. And the majority of them still use files instead of links. So while a lot of them will try and trick you into giving up credentials by visiting a fake login form, many of them still just use a stager or a dropper or an Office document to get started. And then from there, install malware on your system and potentially just steal your password straight out of memory. One of the examples we've been following in the past few years is this specific phish right here, where the message comes in as a spoofed message claiming to come from Office 365 saying, I want to share a file with you. Click here to log in. The link in that message has the victim's email address in it. So when they click the link, they get this form right here that pre-populates with their email address. So it looks like maybe you have a session that you just need to resume by entering your password. The most frightening thing here, though, is it's actually hosted on a Microsoft-owned domain, windows.net. These days, cyber criminals are abusing these cloud hosting services like Azure or AWS or Google Cloud that let them host whatever they want and register a subdomain on these domains. So in this case, the criminal registered Service Manager 00 and then hosted a web page on it. And so they're piggybacking off the known good reputation of Microsoft in this case, where if your user just hovered over the link and saw, oh, windows.net, that's probably secure, they would potentially fall for this phish. These days, it's not good enough just to hover over links. It's still something you absolutely have to do. Check to see where that connection is going to go. But on its own, it's no longer good enough to catch a lot of these threats out there. Another example of how they're getting our information is just through account takeover. So this has a long history, it feels like, of every year there's some executive saying passwords are dead, we killed the password, followed by a breach of tens of millions of passwords, followed by another executive saying passwords are dead, followed by breaches of billions of passwords. In fact, just a few years ago, collections 1 through 5 showed up on the dark web, which were these literal collections of cracked usernames and passwords that ended up, once you remove the duplicates, ended up being around 2.2 billion unique credentials out there that the attackers had just stolen, cracked, and then put up for free for anyone to use. These days, attackers are using these credentials in a lot of different ways. They're using password spraying, where they'll take the top 1,000 most common passwords and try them against an account. And they'll get around a lot of account lockout protections by, instead of doing all those passwords against one account, they'll try 1,000 accounts against one of those passwords before cycling through to the next one and then the next one. So that by the time they get through trying all these accounts, they've already made it past a lot of the account lockout protections that we have. We're seeing credential stuffing where they'll just take a username and password from one breach and then try that username and password against a bunch of different other services. And if you're not using multi-factor authentication, or if you haven't picked a unique password for each of those services, they can often walk right in through the front door that way. We're seeing them use hacking tools like Mimikatz and Windows Credential Editor, actual malware payloads that once they run on your computer, they can steal your password right out of memory if you've entered it recently. Or if you're on a domain joined computer, they can use a pass the hash attack and use that to move laterally across your organization. We're seeing account takeover that can get past some insecure forms of multi-factor authentication, like SMS-based MFA, where if you ask the developers of Reddit, they'll tell you that a few years ago, they were breached even though they had multi-factor authentication. Unfortunately, in their scenario, an attacker not only gained access to their username and passwords, but they called up their cell phone provider and got them to port over the phone number to a SIM card under the attacker's control. Because it turns out it's really easy to call up a telephone provider and social engineer that 18-year-old on the other end of the line and trick them into port over that number. So then not only were they able to log in, but they then intercepted those SMS-based multi-factor tokens, which then let them continue logging in. We've seen credential stuffing attacks against a lot of really large organizations. It's really popular in the retail space as well. So how do you defend against these threats out there? Like, we've gone through a lot of all the scary things that exist on the dark web, how our data ends up, but how do we turn around and actually defend against some of these threats? First, it boils down to a layered defense. I mentioned earlier, there's no silver bullet to security. There's not one thing that you can set up, install, and turn on that's going to keep you safe. Instead, you need a layered approach to protect against a lot of these multi-vector attacks. And at a minimum, some of the things you need to look at are multi-factor authentication, so that if an attacker is able to trick your user into giving up their password through a phish, or maybe crack it or find it somewhere on a dark web database, they still need that additional layer to get past before they can log into an account. When it comes to protecting against some of the malware that we see that fuels these breaches, you really need advanced anti-malware protections. And when we say advanced, we mean proactive, non-signature based. These days, signature-based anti-malware, it's good at quickly catching the known stuff, but it's not good enough on its own. In fact, if you followed our internet security report out of the Threat Lab, you've seen this 0-day malware number we talk about, or the percentage of malware that gets past signature-based services has hovered right around 60% for the last couple years. Meaning if you're just relying on a single layer of signature-based anti-malware, you're missing almost 2/3 of the malware threats that are out there. Instead, look at proactive anti-malware, things that use machine learning or artificial intelligence to predict whether something is bad or good, or a sandbox to detonate a file in a secure environment and watch its behaviors, and then based off the behaviors, determine if it's bad or good. When it comes to the endpoint, you obviously need endpoint protection, or EPP, but also look at endpoint detection and response, or EDR. And how those differ is basically EPP tries to prevent something from running. EDR assumes that something malicious has run, and it looks for the signs of it so it can respond to it quickly. EDR, a strong EDR solution, will typically watch the ongoing memory of existing processes, look for suspicious activity so that if calculator.exe starts loading up Windows encryption libraries and enumerating your file system, it can raise enough red flags and say, hey, it looks like someone injected ransomware into the memory of calculator and started running it from there. Maybe we should shut that down. And then also, you need to be looking at adopting a zero trust approach to your network security. And this could be a 2-hour talk all on its own, but a very high level, zero trust basically boils down to assuming the breach. Assume that you have had a user compromised or a device compromised. And if that's the case, what do you need to watch out for to ensure that they aren't able to move laterally across your network? And this starts with strong identity services. So identifying users using multi-factor authentication, the devices they're connecting from, so that you know that this is Mark connecting from his work-issued laptop from this location here. Then you need to provide the secure access to just what that user should have access to. So a deny by default approach with just allowing what is required for that user to complete their job. There's no reason that my accounting department should have access to our source code repository. Like, they definitely don't have a username to log into it, but there's no need for them to even have network level access to it. Because if they did and they were compromised, an attacker could sit there and hammer away, try and find a vulnerability, use other credentials they've stolen, and potentially move laterally to that critical system. So instead, by denying by default, you can protect a lot of this lateral movement across your network. And then finally, make sure you keep monitoring. So make sure you've got the visibility tools in place so that if there is an incident, you have the chance of catching it before it becomes a major event. So I know that was quite a lot. Thank you all for hopping on. If you have any questions, My Twitter and inbox are always open to any cybersecurity related questions. Thank you again all for joining, and I'll see you around.
Thank you, Mark, for your presentation. We have learned a lot about the dark web and how to protect ourselves out there. And again, don't reuse your passwords. It is kind of scary to hear how well organized and how well found hackers are these days. Thank you, Mark, for the insights. And now I would like to invite Felipe. He is security researcher at Edgate to start with his presentation. Felipe, please go ahead.
Hello, Carolina. Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome again.
Thank you. I'm really glad for the invite. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
So today we're going to talk about ransomware on this year and some trends for the next year. So I'm looking to take an overview on how ransomware operates, how ransomware used to operate, and what we expect for their behavior for next year. So first thing, I would like to talk about the classical ransomware. Well, when we say ransomware, and that's all over the media, we think on a malware that encrypts a lot of data and asks for a ransom payment. In fact, any malware that demands a ransom payment to access a system or a file that was compromised can be named a ransomware. It's not that popular, but even some malware that locks websites and some forums can be named a ransomware. Usually, ransomware will encrypt the files, really the way that we said, but they use a very specific combination of cryptography. Usually, they embed on their code some private key, some public key for RSA or other asymmetric cryptography, and the attackers hold in their possession the private key. So the malware can encrypt the files using this public key, or actually using another symmetric cryptography and encrypting the generated key with the key embedded on it. And the attackers hold the only key that can, in fact, decrypt the files. So what they do is to ask for a payment to deliver you the decryptor or even the key, so you can get your files back. Now, when this kind of attack started to become popular, companies really quickly implemented backup solutions. If you have a backup for your systems, if you have a backup for your files, you're safe against classical ransomware. In the minute that your systems are compromised, you can just roll back everything and continue your operation. That's not the case anymore. So talking about ransom operations nowadays, it's much more complex. The attackers now have a much more complex set of tools. They don't want anymore just encrypting the data. They realize the value is in the data itself. So nowadays, attackers come with an entry point, for instance, like spam or exploiting a flaw in your systems, or even when an employee is a criminal itself and it runs a malware in your systems, that's an entry point. And it can take days, weeks, or even months for the real ransomware attack to occur, because this entry point usually deploys just a botnet or a backdoor that will serve the command control. So the attackers can send commands and exfiltrate data and move laterally. That's the most important stuff on the toolkits nowadays. They are filled with multi-platform kits. They can infect Linux, Mac OS, Windows. They will try to, once they infected one machine, it will try to infect as much more as they can. Even virtual machines, hypervisors, we notice it are being attacked. So if you have a Citrix or VMware and they manage to reach the hypervisor server, they will encrypt all the machines under it. And only after, but they only will launch the encryption after they exfiltrated all the data that they want. So they will try to get all the private data and everything and download it before launching a ransom attack. Because the threat now is it's more than just encrypting, than just delivering the decryption key. If you don't pay the ransom, they threaten to publish in their wall of shames. Some even threaten to send directly to your competitors, depending on the kind of data. So they realized they need to focus on this. And ransomware operations itself started to see themselves as a business. So they form partnerships and they have clients. They offer their ransomware as a service. So an attacker doesn't even know to need how to program a ransomware. You just hire a ransomware service. You can hire a botnet. You can hire all the infrastructure, and the developers only need to take care of the infrastructure. They don't need to search for vulnerable companies. They don't need to get all of that, all their hands dirty. Only who's hiring needs to find out and launch an attack. And that's very profitable for both parts, because the owners, let's say like that, they only focus on developing the malwares. They're focusing on keeping the infrastructure up and running, and they get part of the profit for anyone hiring their services. And anyone hiring the services can hire a bunch more. And we have what we call malware as a service. So it's not only ransomware. They can hire all the steps through an infection. They can hire the bot that will spam the emails. They can hire the dropper that will create, that will initiate the next malware. They can hire all the steps. That's really easy for someone trying to become a cyber criminal, unfortunately. Now, recently, we have seen law enforcement growing a lot when it comes to taking down ransomware operations. I'm adding here as a bullet point some important operations, but those are not the only ones. We are constantly seeing how law enforcement are operating and the impacts that it's having on the ransomware. So recently we had the Emotet operation on the beginning of 2021, and it was huge because it took down like a major botnet that is Emotet, that's used for a lot of attacks, including ransomware, and it contained like millions of infected devices, all connected to a bunch of services that were disrupted. So it was a very big operation, and Emotet still haven't recovered yet. We had some news about recent Emotet attacks, some variations. It's not clear if they are from the same attackers, but most important, they don't have the same infrastructure. So they still haven't recovered yet. That's really huge. On June, we had two very interesting operations on Clop ransomware on dark side. So this the Clop operation I added here to show that it's not only on the United States. There's an international effort on fighting this kind of gangs and arresting the members and taking down the infrastructure. So people are paying more attention to that, and law enforcement is hunting ransomware. On the dark side operation, it was after the Colonial Pipeline attack, which was a major attack in the US. And it was very important that even though the ransom was paid, FBI managed to recover part of this. And it's not a trivial task to follow money on cryptocurrencies. These groups are experts on hiding the money and do all the money laundering regarding cryptocurrencies. So it's a major thing that all these law enforcement firms are focusing on getting the money back, on stopping the operations, and we are seeing how they are behaving. We are going to say shortly that this is causing some volatility on those groups, and DarkSide, after the Colonial Pipeline attack, was found rebranded to Black Matter ransomware. So they are seeing that after they get on the news, after too much people are paying attention, and law enforcement is hunting them, they need to hide, they need to be stealthier. On October, we also had the Kaseya attack with Revo or Sodinokibi. And this one was pretty dramatic as well, because by infecting Kaseya solution, they managed to infect a lot of other clients connected to the structure. So it was really important that after the attack, FBI and a joint operation managed to take down the Sodinokibi infrastructure, and they gave the decryption keys to Kaseya, so their customers could get their systems up and running. From that, we also have some very interesting government actions regarding cybersecurity. In June, we had a memo from the White House right after the Colonial Pipeline attack and the JBS attack, which were two huge attacks covered by the media. And this memo said a lot about security practices. And in November, we had a new Zero Trust Office being launched by the Pentagon. And we have almost monthly joint advisories from FBI, CISA, and NSA regarding some ransomware threats, some other malware threats. So these actions doesn't, at first glance, it doesn't look too much, but this sends a clear message to the criminals that they are carrying. And it also said a very clear message to companies that cybersecurity needs to be taken seriously. So they need to implement zero trust. They need to monitor everything that's going on their networks. They can be a victim of attack, regardless of being a small, medium, or big company. They are on target. So all these actions had some very big impacts on ransomware and on the companies itself. For ransomware, as we just mentioned it, they are constantly rebranding. Before it was very common for us to have like for us to monitor a very big ransomware operation, and they keep the same name, the same brand for years and years and years. Without needing to worry about that. So they just encrypted the files, and well, you can take a look on several other classical ransomware families, and you see this behavior. They don't usually rebrand, but right now with all the ransomware operations, the way that they are running, they can't be on the media for too long. They start on getting targeted for law enforcement, and the operation starts to grow a lot. And it's also hard to keep all the same infrastructure, all the same members when they are afraid of getting arrested. They need to be stealthier. So this causes them to constantly rebrand. Today we see like a ransomware operation in a couple years maximum, it will stop or become another thing. And well, actually, when a ransomware operation stops, it's kind of hard that all its members retire. Usually they go to, some of those members go to other operations or rebrand into a new one. We mentioned that some ransomwares work as a service nowadays. So someone can just hire a ransomware infrastructure and perform their own attack. We also noticed that some ransomwares applying some policies. So for instance, after the Colonial Pipeline attack, DarkSide itself published on their website that they will not accept to use their malware in critical infrastructures. There's also some mentions to healthcare. They don't want to disrupt hospitals and stuff like that. And that's very important because it's not like they really care if they are getting money from hospitals, from critical infrastructures. It's more like a matter that if you attack those things, it will become news. It will attract law enforcement. It will make them more visible, and they need to be stealthier. We also saw some hacking forums that once promoted ransomware products, and I'm talking about deep web ransomware blogs, ransomware forums, and they are not tolerating ransomware anymore. Some still are, but most are adopting policies to keep those things out of their site, so it doesn't attract law enforcement as well. All of this constantly rebranding and member changing cause make their operations very volatile. So with them constantly changing brands and everything, this causes a very huge loss of credibility. A lot of all their operation is based on the fact that the companies, the targeted companies, need to trust their data will be returned once they pay the ransom. If one company is affected by a ransomware and doesn't pay and it pays the ransom and doesn't get their files back, this kind of damages their reputation, because other affected companies, even if they really want their files back and are willing to pay, they do not believe they will have their files back. So this really breaks their entire operation. And on the targeted companies, well, as those ransomwares are trying to be more stealthier, it's caused a lot of other companies that once, before only big companies were attacked, right? But now even small and medium companies are being targeted. So it's easier to move the money, and it doesn't get on the media too much. So every single company needs to start worrying about zero trust. And we are noticing this is happening. We have seen lots of companies, even with the memos and the GDPR, and even here in Brazil, we have a similar law being implemented, LGPD. So companies are starting to worry more about their data and are implementing zero trust to be protected against ransom. And with all the law enforcement operation, it grows a confidence in law enforcement. So it's not only when it comes to attacks where a ransomware steals your data and threatens to publish it, some companies are now believing that law enforcement will take down those websites, will take down those cybercrimes gang. So they don't need to pay the ransom. And of course, we highly recommend for everyone to not pay the ransom. We understand every company has their policies and their needs. So we don't judge, for instance, a hospital that needs to get their operations up and running. But once you pay the ransom, you get more credibility to those attackers. They get more resources as well. So they can hire more people, they can hire more other malware as a services. Their operations can grow. They have more resources to be stealthier and to perform much more attacks. So once you pay a ransom, you are actually financing a lot other attacks. So after all that, what are the countermeasures? We already know how classical and new ransomware operates. They will try to enter your network. They will try to infect as many computers as they can, and only then they will launch a ransomware attack. So what we consider the countermeasures, and it's a countermeasure because there is no silver bullet solution. You need to adopt zero trust. You need to isolate the perimeters on your network. If you have an important database, you need to make sure only the systems that needs to access this database has that access. Everything else needs to be an entire different perimeter on your network, isolated. You need to profile every user and every device entering in your network. If it's even if it's an old device, you need to make sure to profile it and make sure all the security solutions are there. You need to make sure the user, it is what it is. It's very common to have leaked accounts, leaked passwords being used on cybersecurity attacks. So you need to have multi-factor authentication. You need to make sure that access is not uncommon, and profile every single connection. If an user that doesn't need to tries to access a different system or try to run, I don't know, like a query to select all the items in your database, that's not a common access. You need to isolate this guy. You need to break the perimeter. You only give access to user and systems to what they really need. Everything else is a breach. But all that only makes sense if you are constantly monitoring those connections and those users. So every connection, every port, every system that's up and running, you need to make sure it's following your best security policies. Any weird access, you need to automatically quarantine all that perimeter. If you have a database and you suspect a query there is made to leak data, for instance, it's selecting all the users and hashed passwords in your database, you quarantine it. You stop their connections, you shut down the perimeter, and it seems like a hard measure, but it will save you a lot of money if it was indeed an attack. You need to contain the damages, and you need to perform forensics after it. So shut down the perimeter, call the forensics, start your backup operation if you have one, which we recommend you do. And only then you will be able to stop a threat before it gets damaged and before it stops all the damage. Thank you. This was my keynote.
Well, many thanks, Felipe, for your presentation. You have presented some very interesting facts and also trends like the ransomware as a service. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. We have reached the roundtable part of this Silicon Security Day, the Awareness Edition. Now we want to dive deeper in some topics and specifically address what is on the mind of the audience. With me is today Jelle Wieringer. He is security advocate in EMEA and KnowBe4. Felipe Duarte, he is security operations manager at AppGate. And David Howell, he is technology editor. Welcome to this roundtable, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for being my guests.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, and welcome. Guys, we are living tough times. It seems like everybody is getting your data or everyone is doing everything. So my starter question to you will be, what is the major challenge we have now in cybersecurity? Jelle, do you want to take this one?
What is the major challenge in cybersecurity that we have? Well, I think that the biggest challenge now is that the world is moving very quickly, both in where we want to be with our businesses and with what's happening around us in the world at large, pandemic and all. I think the major challenge is keeping up with everything. The major challenge is making sure that you're prepared and making sure that you're actually on top of things, both on the business side, on your personal life and everything. I think that is probably the biggest challenge.
Thank you, Jelle. Felipe, do you want to add something to that?
I agree 100% with Jelle. Basically, it's very hard to keep track on all the new changes as technology evolves. And I mean, today we all use cloud computing a lot more than we used to, and the security challenges are very different. So it's hard to keep on track with all the changes on technology and, of course, on cybersecurity as well.
Thank you. And David, what about you?
Well, I think for me, I think when I speak to businesses, the challenge for them is trying to understand where their threat perimeter actually is today, because that's shifted. It used to be where your servers were, or it was centralized with your cloud-based services. But of course, with the pandemic and these massive decentralization of workforces, we're all working from home, we're working from coffee shops, we're working from anywhere we can connect. Where's the threat perimeter? And can we understand where that threat perimeter actually is? And if we can, how do we protect that?
For sure. And why is security awareness so important these days? Jelle?
It's the most effective way to secure your workforce. It's the most effective way to actually secure your organization at this moment, because the majority of threats don't target your technology. They target the human behind it, the human layer behind it. So we definitely need to pay more attention to security awareness. The second thing is, it is, as I said, the most effective way, but it's also easy to do. It is, you can train your people in a way that fits the people, that fits the individual, that is a fun way that motivates them. And actually it's a good way to add value to your business as well.
Mm-hmm. Jelle, in your presentation, you pointed out that educating people is a very quick and effective way to reduce risk. Why we don't do it enough?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people try to do it, but it's not easy to do it in the right way. You can buy a security awareness training product, start doing training, but that doesn't mean you will actually shape the behavior of your users. And that, in the end, is what we need to do. And shaping behavior is something totally different than just simply teaching something new to somebody. So I think companies struggle with the part of how can we shape the behavior in such a way that it actually is a lasting effort. That it's something that the people understand how to apply the skills they've learned during their actual work.
And do you think that ultimately that's a change in business culture? You have to move to a culture of security, where at the moment it's a skill, but actually what I'm seeing is that businesses need to fundamentally change how security becomes part of their culture.
Yeah, I talk about security culture as being part of the business culture, because I think that business culture in itself is way bigger than just security culture. But I do think that if you go from awareness to behavior to culture, the ABCs of our business, yes, it needs to be a culture thing. And only once it's a culture thing, then it will be embedded well enough in organizations to be the new normal, to become basic hygiene, because that's basically what you need to make it. You need to make it into basic hygiene for your organization.
For sure. And Felipe, is security awareness different, for example, in Germany compares with other regions? What do you think?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Yeah, sure. I am asking you if security awareness is different for example, in Germany or in Europe, compares with other regions.
No, I think security awareness is probably the same process. You teach your employees how to handle social engineering attacks and how to predict malicious behavior. The point is, it's very hard to create a process that works for every single company. You have different products, you have different kind of employees, you handle your clients different. So just trying to apply some generic process to it, some generic trainings usually don't work, because your security is as strong as your weak link. So if you have an entry point for an attacker and the employees in this part are not prepared, you will be attacked.
Great, thank you. In the past, a lot of people used to think about cybersecurity or that cybersecurity was a topic just for large companies, mainly because of the cost. Do you think there's a change in the way that companies think about cybersecurity these days?
I think it's certainly moved. I think the threat vectors have certainly moved to smaller organizations because ultimately they have maybe weaker security. I kind of see the landscape has changed a little bit there. Certainly small businesses have maybe come under more attack, particularly over the pandemic because of that reason.
Yes.
I think they understand that. They certainly can see that the threat vectors are changing and they are slightly different. I think security is still security, still the same. But how you react to what's happening with your particular business, I think Felipe is right. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I think it's a misunderstanding that you can do security with something off a shelf, you bolt that onto your systems, and then you've done security. That's not really going to cut it for the threat vectors we're seeing today. It's really a case of look at your business closely.
Sure.
Which sectors you're in, who are your customers, what are your threat vectors, and once you understand that, I think then you can then go and create a bespoke security system for you. That won't fit everyone. It has to be for you and what your business is doing, your people, the networks you're using. It has to be designed for the individual business, in my view.
It has to be customized for sure. Yeli, what is your experience regarding your customers on that matter?
Well, most of the world organizations are built up of SMB organizations. They're smaller organizations with budgets that are far different than the ones that are large enterprise. And I think that the times when small businesses viewed security as purely a cost play, where they didn't want to spend the money, that has changed thanks to, on one hand, the media. You can't look at any media anymore without seeing some form of cyber attack being mentioned. So that's one version, one type which enables or actually moves SMB towards more security. The other side is compliance. It doesn't matter if you're a big company or a small company. Here in Europe, we have GDPR. It applies to whomever has that type of data. So you kind of have to do more security. I do absolutely agree with David that it needs to be bespoke. It needs to fit your size of your company, what you're doing, basically the risk that you have as an organization. And I do think that SMB organizations, smaller organizations, are more risk aware nowadays because of everything. And being more risk aware means you make better decisions on security. And that's what I'm seeing.
I think that's interesting, because do you think that the smaller organizations, by their nature, they're more agile, so they can make changes much quicker? And that's great for security, because if you do see something that's happening, you can move very quickly to either mitigate that or to defend your business. Where a larger company, they move much more slowly, and ultimately, the security that they're putting in place can be, very, very slow to filter through and actually make any kind of real impact. I think small businesses, they're in a great position because they're small, they're agile, they can move quickly. And if the threat vectors are changing almost daily, if you're a small business, you need to have that agility, not just with everything in your business. I think if you can do that with security, you're in a great position moving forward.
That's definitely true.
Felipe, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I agree 100%. The attacks are actually moving a lot more focused on the small companies. We had some major ransomware attacks, for instance, very recent that break out some on the news, like the Colonial Pipeline attack, and that brings a lot of attention. And it's not easy for the hackers too. They need to be stealthier. They need to keep their operations up and running. So they are focusing on the small business that bring less attention, and the money is running there as well. So small companies really need to strengthen their security and focus on their perimeters, and do security works just for small companies as for big companies, and they are getting targeted a lot more now.
We all have to deal with this problem. Cybersecurity is a key issue for businesses worldwide. This is especially true for German innovation-driving enterprises sabotage and industrial espionage cost German companies. And let me say that 223 billion euros cost every year these attacks, these cyber attacks, or these actions in Germany alone. This is huge. This is really huge. This is really a problem to affect all of us, all companies in each size. Jelle, what we are going to do next, or we have to do next in order to improve cybersecurity?
That's a simple question for a really big topic.
Yeah, sure.
So if you look at Germany, the one thing that you see is that Germany is digitizing very rapidly. It's really focusing, healthcare is focusing on being more digital in nature. Manufacturers are. With digitization comes risk, cybersecurity risks. So the one thing I think that a lot of companies need to do is reevaluate where they are today, where they want to go, and adjust their current security measures or security posture to that new world that they want to move into. I think that a lot of organizations focus on the business side of things and want to make that more modern, more agile, more digital. That's great. Just don't forget about security. Don't leave that in the legacy state it's in. Take that along the ride to the future. That's one of the things that will really, really help.
Mm-hmm. And Felipe, what do you can add to this matter?
I think companies need to start thinking with a zero trust mindset, and that works with small companies, for big companies. You need to know that every access can be compromised, every device can be compromised. And zero trust is not like a silver bullet, is not a solution that you're going to install and it will repel all the attackers. But when you get attacked, because it will happen sometime, the damage will be minimum. You will isolate your perimeters, you will get your systems up and running in no time. That's the solution for this problem. You need to consider security in everything.
Sure. David, what is your experience? I mean, you talk to a lot of companies.
For me, it's all about data. It's all about understanding what's happening within your business. Because I often see with particularly security, it's almost out of focus for a lot of businesses. They can't see the issue. And that ultimately is the, I guess, the foundation which you build your security on. It has to be data. It has to be an understanding of what's happening across your networks, who's doing what. If you can't see that, how can you defend your systems? How can you create a robust security system if you can't see what's happening? So for me, it's all about visibility. It's all about using the information, the data you have, look at all the metrics, look at the traffic, look what's happening. If you can do all of that as a starting point, that's the best foundation for a really secure system, because you can see what's happening. Without visibility, I don't think you can have really good security. So it has to be that, and you get the visibility with more data.
I totally agree with you, and I would like to talk about a major problem: unindexed attacks. Companies are becoming victims of data breach. They are having other incidents, but they can take weeks till they figure out what happened. How can we improve this situation?
Well, I think the scary stuff with security is this shift with a lot of malicious hacking, which is where they come in and do something. They enter the system, but do nothing. They infiltrate a system, and they can be in there for weeks and months. And you can't see that. And they are learning the system. They're paying attention to what people are doing inside the system. They may be becoming sysadmins and all the rest of that. That's the kind of scary thing, is that someone's in your system and you don't know that.
And for weeks or even months.
For months, this kind of stealth attack. That's the scary stuff. That's kind of really where I think businesses are not paying enough attention to that kind of attack. Normally with security, you see an anomaly. Something happens on a system and you can see that. These kind of attacks are invisible. That's a worrying trend that I guess security in general has to kind of come along with some solutions. But again, I think that begins with how businesses have a good security stance. If they can have that and have visibility, these kinds of attacks hopefully can be mitigated or at least reduced in their impact.
The impact, yes. Jelle, can you add something to that matter? Do you agree with David?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that the biggest problem for a lot of businesses that if you look at sleepaware or how do you detect something if you don't know it's there, and if you can't see, you don't have an inkling that it's there? That's the biggest problem. And most organizations I know simply aren't equipped themselves to figure this out. So my piece of advice on this would be assume you've been breached, assume there is something in your network, and get somebody in to an outside source and a security expert, get somebody in to investigate. Do that periodically. You do pen testing for your systems. Include this in your pen testing. Make sure that they look at, hey, let's take a look at all the software that's there. Make sure your asset management is in place so you know what you should have, and then look for anomalies. Make sure that you inform your users about it. That's one of the things that a lot of people that work at organizations don't have a clue that something might be on their system without them knowing it, without them figuring it out. If you have a virus, your antivirus usually rings the bell, like, hey, I found something. If you've got mining software on your crypto mining software on your laptop slows down, so you'll notice this. But a lot of sleepaware, you don't even notice. So you need an analyst, a specialist to come in and help you look for it periodically.
Mm-hmm. Felipe, and how can we reach the goal to don't have undetected attacks anymore in our company?
Well, I think David mentioned a very important stuff. First, the attacker will breach into your network and it will move laterally. It will try to infect as many systems as he can. These signals will be very, very subtle. You need to keep on monitoring every connection, every system, and pay attention to anything that it's doing that it shouldn't. A connection, suddenly a query in your database that required all the data. What is that? That's data exfiltration. And he also mentioned that the value is in the data. So you need to focus on where your sensitive data is. If you're a financial company, that's much harder, but everything that is important, you need to pay attention. Any connection needs to be validated. Any user having access to it, you need to profile it. Zero Trust give you the tools to do that, but you need to implement this mindset on the whole thing.
Yes, I also think a lot of businesses, they think they can do security as a sort of one pass through their business. They've done it once, a bit like a threat assessment, for health and safety. We do the threat assessment once a year, it's done. And I kind of think that security is the same, that they can do a threat assessment, put some systems in place. We've done security, let's move on to something else. And it's not this ongoing, I guess, the view of their data and their networks. That it has to be an organic thing. I guess it evolves over time. I mean, you've often talked about how ransomware evolves over time, how it changes and morphs, and that's the kind of thing with security. It changes and it changes and morphs over time. And we kind of don't have a. I don't know what y'all think about this. It's for me. It's the often parallel with security tends to be viruses. If you have a virus definition, we can see it, therefore we can kill it. It's not quite the same thing with general security, is it? Because we can't really define any kind of malicious attack which we can't see. So if it doesn't have a definition, you can't do anything about that. So that idea that you can have a parallel with antivirus software kind of isn't valid, I don't think. We need something that's more of a system which evolves over time, that learns. And I guess that's where all the AI and machine learning comes
Yeah,
in.
sure, but because you have to think about it, hackers, they don't used to use the front door for their attacks.
Well, actually, sometimes they do, but I do
Sometimes,
agree. I do agree with you.
Yeah.
So it's all about getting assistance. You can use AI for that. You can. It's about real-time visibility, or as real-time as you can get. It's about getting intelligence into your security program, using AI, using outsourced experts. And I agree, you can't really compare it to a antivirus or a virus anymore. It's different. You don't know you've been attacked. Like customers that ask me, so show me I've been hacked. Like, yeah, how? That's difficult to do. It is all about being in control. It's all about visibility, but also making sure, and that's where zero trust comes in, that you have done everything you can to limit the damages, to make sure that everybody has the authentication and has the credentials, etc., in place that they need, and have the rights in place that they need, and basically disallow everything else. And that's a very solid strategy.
For sure. Jelle, you point out in your presentation that bad guys change their attack methods quick. And then how we can protect us all at all?
Awareness, that's one. That's one of the key points where awareness comes in. It's understanding the fact that what you're looking at today can change by tomorrow. It's understanding the nature, the foundation of an attack, rather than just the peculiars or the particular elements alone. So awareness is one. The second thing, what you can do is, just like attacks can morph, can evolve, so does your security has to evolve. Keep up with trends. Look at the data as David specified. Make sure that you understand where your actual risk is instead of just looking at threats. Because if I look at the media, ransomware is everywhere. That doesn't mean it's the biggest threat for my company. It can be, but I need to look at the data to confirm whether it is or not. And if it's not, I need to figure out where the actual biggest risk is at, and I need to make sure that I'm protected from that. So it's all about being in control, effectively.
And to have the right tools.
Yeah, tools is one, expertise is two, people, but culture is another one. If nobody in your organization understands the value of security, then your users are your biggest risk, because they're the most vulnerable part of your organization, even though they're often the biggest asset of your organization as well. So you need to make sure that everybody understands why you're doing this, why it's important, so everybody can contribute in their own way.
Yes, I mean, it's still basic stuff. I got an email this morning from Bitwarden. I'm just having a look at what they said. 92% of respondents reuse the same password across multiple sites. Still, here we are.
It's a huge problem for sure.
20 years after the internet, and we all use passwords, and we're still using the same password across several sites. And some of these are accessing highly sensitive information. I mean, that's a crazy position still to be in. But I think that, again, that comes back to a lack of realization of how important security is, and how you and I, when we're accessing systems, in our businesses, have to do that securely. And crazy things like nearly over 90% still using the same passwords is a simple fix. I don't know what the other panel thinks. But if you actually started to put that in place and say, right, we are now going to have a password regime, and you will do this. There will be different passwords, strong passwords. We use password managers across our businesses. That can have a radical impact straight away. It's a simple change like that. But often, I think businesses don't even see that as an option, or they don't implement that when that's an easy win.
Well, I usually tell my customers, instead of buying people a bottle of wine for Christmas or something like that, give them a license to a password manager and actually tell them how to use it.
Fancy gift.
But it is one of those things where you can actually help protect users both in the workplace, but also at home. It is an incredible win if you get that in place. And it's easy. It's so easy to do.
It's really easy. Yeah.
It is. It's not expensive. It's easy to teach people. There's plenty of tools out there where you can actually look at what passwords people are using in your organization and tell them, warn them, like, hey guys, don't use the same password twice, or maybe use a complex password, or rather a passphrase if you can.
Because a password manager generates also a new password for each account, and it is not complicated at all.
No, it isn't. It is really easy. There's actually no excuse if you ask me, but hey.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, do you often think that, I guess from a user's point of view, from a culture point of view, often security from their point of view is just too hard. It's just too difficult to manage. So they just basically default to using the same password and whatever it is. Or I've walked around offices with passwords stuck on Post-it notes, stuck on monitors, that whole thing, and that's still going on. But is it because security is just difficult? It's just a hard thing to communicate and a hard thing for people to do. They'd rather do something simple. So if we can make, I guess, access security to, from that point of view, we're talking about password. If we can make it easier, do you think the security stance of a business would improve if we could just make it easier to implement?
Do you agree with that, Felipe?
Yeah, but it's actually, I think it's more like a question of culture, because it's not just a matter of not using the same password. They need to understand why that's a risk. I have seen several companies just applying some password policies like, hey, we change your passwords every 2 months so you don't use the same one. But then the employees just add like a counter, password 0, password 1, password 2.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't understand why that's a security risk. You need to teach them how to do proper security and why that's important. Most people don't realize, but using like a combination of several words for a password, like horse, submarine, store, man, it's much more secure than having a short password with lots of letters, different letters and special characters. And it's about creating a long password, one password for each stuff. You need to make sure people understand why that's important. And of course, you can't just rely on passwords. You need to have multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
Passwords can leak, passwords can be broken.
Sure. You mean it is not about technology, but how to apply it, right?
Yeah, it's about people understanding why and how they can implement that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make it fun again. Most people are not motivated
Also,
to be secure. So if they actually have good passwords or have a good password policy, if they use MFA, reward them. I've seen companies that pass out chocolate bars to people
Really?
that actually do their security
well, this
awareness
would be
training.
an incentive for me.
I would work for them.
And it's really easy to do, but it's all about making sure security is relevant for them, so they understand why they should be have secure behavior, making sure they have the tools, the skills to do so. So provide them with MFA, provide them with password vault, but also make it fun. Because if it isn't fun, you're not going to participate. You're not going to do anything with it. Mm. And that's something where most IT departments, well, they sometimes skip the fun part. That's why I often advise involve HR. Mm-hmm. Get a shenanigans department to do something fun around the topic of security, motivate people.
I totally agree with you. And I would like to know from all of my guests today, what is your advice for companies that want to improve their cybersecurity?
Shall I go first, guys? Is that okay? Right. Collaborate.
Just in a few words.
Yeah, my word would be collaborate. Don't try to do it on your own. Look at the experience others have, learn from it, share your experience, and go at it together. That's how you do security.
David?
Well, for me, it certainly is visibility. It's a case of let's go away once you watch this and go and audit your business. Go and have a look at what are you doing with security. Just have a look at it. Can you see all of the potential risks that your business might be under? And if the answer is no, then at least you then have an idea of, or at least a roadmap that will take you hopefully to stronger security. But initially, you have to do that audit. Go away and do a security audit today, and identify where you're good, where you're bad, and all the stuff in the middle, because the stuff in the middle is probably the stuff that you need to take care of.
Sure.
But once you've completed your audit, then at least you have a visibility of the issues. And if you can see them, you can deal with them.
Sure. Felipe, what do you think about it?
I think all cybersecurity needs to evolve along with the business. It's not just a matter of implementing new technology so your website runs faster and so your systems can handle more employees, more access. Your cybersecurity needs to evolve along with the business. If you're expanding fast, creating new servers, isolate them, create perimeters, and there's all the visibility stuff that Dave just mentioned. That's perfect, and it's all together. You need to see what's going on, and if not, you need to evolve your cybersecurity, your solutions, your mindset, so you can be prepared.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your tips. Well, guys, many thanks to all of you. Thank you, Jelle. Thank you, Felipe. And thank you, David, for the insights. It was an interesting and very open exchange today. We have learned a lot of cybersecurity, and I think there was something for everyone who attended this event. And to all of you in the office, at home, or on the road, thank you so much for joining us. And please don't forget to protect your organization and to keep innovating. Goodbye.